At the right place, at the right time, with the right people. That is how Mr. Fynn Kydland explains his global success. This modest man is a real scientist. He, along with his colleague Edward Prescott, after a long research, has put forward a new theory of economic cycles, which include both a theory of long-term economic growth and microeconomic theory of consumer behavior and firms. For this conclusion, scientists received the Nobel Prize. The crew of program Persona Grata met Nobel laureate Fynn Kydland during his visit to the Kazakh capital. Professor Kydland is engaged not only in research but also in quite active teaching career. He founded the Laboratory for Aggregate Economics and Finance at the University of California. Mr. Kydland is a researcher of Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, Cleveland and St. Louis. Scientist and economist Kydland and Prescott received Nobel Prize in 2004. The works of these economists have helped to explain why high inflation could develop, despite the fact that the declared aim of monetary policy is price stability. Kydland and Prescott held a large-scale study in 2 years, which are closely interconnected: economic cycles and correctness of the economic policy of the state, and their co-research problem may be briefly expressed in the following form: how to predict the activity of the government on the basis of predicting GDP growth and interest rates. For their great contributions in addressing these challenges, they were awarded the Nobel Prize.
In our case, they cited two things, and one was to provide we provided a framework for doing macroeconomic analysis, emphasizing the dynamics of the macroeconomy, and we did it completely differently from what was typical at the time. A macroeconomic model used to be a system of equations. Consumption function, investment function, labor supply function, so on. We started with the decision problems of people. So we constructed a model with millions of people and thousands of businesses. And it turns out the models at that level can be calibrated the way you do in sciences and other fields. And basically we use the model as kind of a measuring device to measure how big something is or how large the role of something is. And that kind of framework is constructing a model at that level. That's what everyone does in macroeconomics. What's different is, as computers have become more powerful, now one can introduce much more detail into a model and expand the set of questions one can ask. That was one thing. The other is this discovery that optimal government policy is time inconsistent. And that in order for good, consistent policy to be carried out and trusted, it needs a commitment mechanism, which unfortunately is very difficult to come up with where it's most important, in the fiscal arena. In the monetary arena, one possible solution that has worked pretty well in some countries is to make the central bank independent from political pressure.
These themes, even before receiving the prize, took the most important, so to say, a place of scientific research of Kydland and Prescott. They extended the theory of economic policy and showed that those people who are responsible for the conduct of economic policy cannot be trusted with the establishment of laws, as they lead to an increase in inflation in spite of their subjective goal on low inflation. Laureates presented this as one of many examples of the main problems of economic policy management.
Part of it is because after the financial crisis, which really exposed problems in many areas, I like to emphasize, for example, the fact that in countries such as, in Eurozone countries such as Spain, Portugal, and Italy, productivity stopped growing completely beginning of the 1990s. And it happened well before they joined the Eurozone, so I don't think, I think talk of the Euro as a problem for these countries is drawing attention away from the real issue. Sometimes, to be facetious, I say, well, it's lucky the financial crisis came so that these countries could become aware of where the problems really lie, but it's a little discouraging that they don't seem to be doing too much about it. In the United States, I think the main problem is after the financial crisis, there's too much uncertainty about what the future tax environment is going to be. And that, I think, is a theme in many parts of the world. Too much uncertainty about future tax environments, future regulatory environment. The main growth-promoting decisions, innovative activity, capital formation, they're very forward-looking decisions. They involve lots of expenses today. The returns come over 5, 10 or more years in the future. And it matters for those returns what the fiscal environment, the regulatory environment is going to be. So that sort of uncertainty, I think, is holding back, or has been holding back, activity in many parts of the world. The main thing that has struck me, and this, in part I became aware of it, I had a meeting a year or two ago with the government officials, and I actually used Kazakhstan in my first plot, often in my speeches, because the growth has been very impressive in the past 10 or 15 years.
Included a couple of recent countries, Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, at the very bottom, and they have grown very fast in recent years.
I was told that now they have a very benign problem, and that is how to find people with the right skills to keep the growth momentum going. Now, my impression is they have really put in a great effort to upgrade and expand the university system, add new universities, expand existing universities, and so that kind of production of human capital, as we call it, is exactly what seems like a smart thing to do.
Professor Kydland always liked to be involved with economic problems, as well as his colleague Edward Prescott, who once noted that its working methods are quite different from the methods of Kydland. I try to work quickly and make mistakes, whereas my Finnish colleague prefers to work slowly and not make mistakes, says Prescott. Fynn Kydland was given a lecture on economics at the Norwegian school when he learned the news about his Nobel Prize. After listening to an assistant who brought him the good news, Kydland survived a standing ovation and continued the lecture.
I was born in southwestern Norway and grew up in a farming community. We had 7 neighbors. They were all farmers. We were the only ones without a farm. My father was a pioneer in starting trucking business, driving mostly for the farmers in the area. I was the only one in my class in a rural class to go even to high school. So back then that was rather uncommon. I was good in math in high school, so I was initially uncertain what to do. I thought, well, math is useful in engineering. But then I happened to run into someone who was running 2 businesses on the side of being a teacher, and decided to go to the Norwegian School of Economics and Business Administration, as it was called then. It's since been shortened to the Norwegian School of Economics, but it's basically a business school. And there I happened to take a course from someone who I regard as my mentor, who introduced me to very interesting in mathematical material. So when time came to when most students would look for a job, I thought I went there to eventually become a business manager. This mentor of mine came and asked if I wanted to become his research assistant. I said yes. And then eventually, after half a year, he went on leave of absence, or sabbatical, to Carnegie Mellon University. He invited me to follow along, and I decided to apply there to their PhD program. And that's where I got my PhD. And also, that's where I first met the co-recipient of the Nobel Prize, Edward Prescott. But anyway, so this mentor, if it hadn't been for him, I probably would have, who knows what I would have done. And I thought he was so important, and when the Nobel announcement came and I was told I could invite 15 people, I knew he had to be one of them, which I know he appreciated.
Everything that is connected to his research, Fynn Kydland is still very much into it, as in the time when he was a student. Man of the most accurate figures is very thankful that he met on his life path people of the highest level. Such meetings, scientist says, allows you to stay interested and engage in the progress. Now Professor has hatched the idea of creating a major research institute, which will bring together researchers from around the world to work together to find solutions on many outstanding issues in the world of economics. It was Persona Grata. See you soon!